Get everything set up here. You should be able to see my notes. Let's get back to the beginning here. Just a little news thing I'll mention. I'm going to show you this. That's a booklet that was just published, The Lake of Fire and the Second Death. It's just in the last couple of days it came out. It's actually a revision of something I did before, but it's being promoted by Maranatha Media in Australia, and it's on about 4 websites, and hopefully will encourage people, because it explains what this is all about, and it's not something we need to fear like most people would with their understanding of it. So let's go ahead, and Lorna has mentioned Tyler and Brittany. Lorna's been having studies with them, a young couple, I think they're just in their 20s. And in their study last time, apparently they said, or they talked about what should we look at next time. And they said, well, what about the Abomination of Desolation? What does that term mean? There's kind of a mysterious term that comes up in Scripture. Excuse me. So we're going to look at that this morning, especially relate it to the temple. And along with that, you're going to get a good dose of prophecy, because we're going to have to look at quite a few verses in Daniel, especially, and other places. So, yeah, we'll have to do a bit of reading, but to get a proper understanding of it, we kind of need the background. But it's good to review that, some of those prophetic things as well, because we don't maybe go over that as often as we should. So if someone could start off, please, reading Matthew 24 and verses 15 and 16. Matthew 24, 15, and 16. Okay, Paul.
Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains.
Okay, thank you. We won't read the one in Mark. It's almost exactly the same. But Mark says the same thing. And so this is a warning. And here's a question. Is this prophecy meant for us? Do we need to be concerned about this abomination of desolation?
Yes,
Yes, Jesus was
because it
talking to
says,
us.
whoever reads will understand.
Okay, good point. We're reading it, so it seems we need to understand it. But we don't live in Judea, right?
What's that got to do with it?
Yeah, what do we have to do with it? And we don't live in Judea, so why should it apply to us?
It's to everybody.
Is it a dual prophecy?
Okay, is it a dual prophecy, he's asking, meaning what?
Well, did it have a fulfillment for the people of Christ's day who were living in Judea? And does it have an application for us too?
Okay, good question. Paul.
Verse 14 is talking about, well, let me read it. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a witness to all the nations, and then the end will come. And then it's talking about the abomination of desolation. So it must be a dual prophecy.
Okay, that verse 14 is kind of putting it in an end time context, isn't it? And in fact, you could back up another verse to verse 13. It says, but he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved. And if you read carefully through all of Matthew 24, you'll see there's kind of a mixture of what's to happen in their day in Judea and what's to happen for the whole world, of course, including us.
Right.
What is Matthew 24 kind of known as or famous for?
Signs of the time of the end.
Okay, it's kind
Signs
of
of his coming.
about the time of the end, isn't it?
Signs of
Okay.
his coming.
Let's read Matthew
Yeah.
24, Matthew 24 and verse 3. Sorry, Matthew 24, 1 to 3, I guess is what I want.
I can read that.
Okay.
Then Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came to him to show him the buildings of the temple. And Jesus said to them, "Do you not see all these things? Assuredly, I say to you, not one stone shall be left here upon another that shall not be thrown down." Now, as he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?"
Okay, so did these things that they asked about include the abomination of desolation?
Yes.
No.
Yes, no? Well, the words aren't in there,
Yes.
but I
Well,
think,
probably, but he's asking about, do you not see these things? I think the temples, he was talking about the temple being wrecked.
right, right. Yes,
So they were asking, when will these things be?
yes,
Meaning the destruction of the temple.
yes. And that's what he was talking about. So why did they, when we asked him that question, say, when will these things be, talking about the temple and the sign of the end of the world? You know, the end of the world is like 2,000 years after them.
But they didn't know that. At
Ah,
that
okay.
time, I bet they were connecting the two things together, I think, as the
Yes,
destruction
I
of
think
the
so too.
destruction of the temple would be at the time of the end when Christ would come or something like that. That's maybe what they were thinking.
Yeah, the Jews apparently held the temple in very, very high regard. And in their mind, for the temple to be destroyed was kind of synonymous with the end of the world, or it could only happen at the end of the world. So that makes sense then.
Yeah.
So the next question is, did Jesus' answer include references to the end of the world after they asked him that question?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay, what's some verses in Matthew 24 that point to that?
Well, verses 27 to
Matthew.
30 or 31 talk about his second coming.
Okay, do you want to read those, 27 to 31?
Somebody else can read, I just read.
Okay,
I can read it.
okay, excellent.
For as the lightning cometh out of the east and shineth even unto the west, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For wheresoever the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered together. Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of heavens shall be shaken. To 30, right?
Sure.
And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory.
Okay, that pretty
And he
obviously,
shall send his
go ahead.
And he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from all the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other.
Okay, does that sound like the second coming?
Yep.
Yes.
Does.
Okay, Dorothy, did you have something you were going to say?
Yeah, it sounds like the second coming.
Okay, there's a few verses in that chapter. Verse 14, I guess we read that. Then shall the end come. Verse 44. Therefore be ye also ready, for in such an hour as you think not, the Son of Man cometh as in second coming. So considering this dual application aspect of this, is it possible that the sign of the abomination of desolation could apply to us, have some relevance for us as well?
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
I think so, yeah. While we're in this chapter. I'm not sure all the verses we read, but um, okay, I must be in the wrong place here.
14.
Okay. Matthew 24:14 says, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness to all nations, and then shall the end come. That's kind of interesting. Any comment about that?
In all nations
This gospel of the kingdom has to go to all nations.
should be preached all over the world.
Yes.
Well, I'd say that this time that we're living in is the time when this is happening with all the internet and satellites, TVs, and all that kind of stuff. Not to mention missionaries and whatever, but it's more easily accessible now, the gospel, I would say. It's going further because of technology.
Okay, Paul, you have a comment?
Well, I think this gospel has a lot to do with it. What gospel is being preached? There's been a lot of errors through the centuries in the gospel that was put forth, and now this message of the character of God that I don't believe was, I don't know, it probably was preached at some time to some people, but now the understanding is really unfolding, and it seems like that's really a gospel that our Father is excited about when we're really coming to know his character.
Okay, that you're right. This gospel of the kingdom is critically important. Even in Paul's day, he said, I forget exactly how the verse goes, but you're so soon taken up or something with another gospel. Like there was the original gospel, and then another gospel quickly came in, a gospel that included God who wanted to punish for every sin, who is not forgiving, required sacrifice in order to pay the penalty. But the true gospel is quite different from that, as we're learning, I hope, week by week. And it is starting to spread much more, but it has a long ways to go, because the traditional gospel, it definitely has some problems with it, and it's what most of the world believes. So,
Right.
yes, Lorna.
Even Paul warned that ravening wolves would be creeping into the church back in his day.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
And Jesus, at the beginning of this chapter 24, verse 4 and 5, he says, and Jesus answered and said to them, take heed that no one deceives you. For many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and will deceive many. So this is definitely talking about end times, because the people who were in Jerusalem at the time of its destruction, way back in history, they weren't, that wasn't an issue for them. It is an issue for us now.
Yeah. Okay. Axel, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'm reading Matthew chapter 24, verse 2, where he says, there shall not be left one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. And I perceive that this is a Jewish system that will be done away with during that time, prior to what Christ says is his return. Is there a parallel between those events and what we see happening today? Because in the book of Hebrews 26, it speaks of at that time his voice shook the earth, but now he has promised, once more I will shake not only the earth but also the heavens. So is there an agitation, just as there was back then under the old Jewish system, compared to now, where we have the character of God and not a watered down doctrine as the mainstream church is preaching, something that would cause agitation? I don't know
Yeah.
if I'm that
Well, I'm
sounds
not
clear enough.
sure I picked up the exact point of your question there, but we will see.
Yeah, is there a parallel between the old system, the old Jewish system, and our system today? Because with the introduction of righteousness by faith, we see that there's an agitation within the mainstream church. So just as the Jewish system, are we seeing the same thing happening now? Because with the dispersion of that doctrine of righteousness by faith, not all the mainstream churches have come on board with that. It's only a handful of people, of persons, and yet we see people are accepting the message of Christ and his righteousness.
Yeah, I think there's going to be agitation all the way through. And you started that by mentioning Matthew 24:2, the one stone upon another.
Yeah.
And what we're going to find is a common thread as we look at this is about the temple and its destruction, and what the temple is physically and spiritually. So hopefully we'll pick up on that parallel, and that will help us. I'd just like to go now into a little bit about the word meanings. We want to look at abomination of desolation. So abomination is in the Strong's Concordance. Strong's Concordance is defined as a foul thing, a detestable thing. It refers to idols and things pertaining to idolatry. Okay, so it's just something kind of foul and nasty in a sense. Desolation. We know what that word means in English, so we don't have to say too much about that. Desolation is kind of destruction and things falling apart, but it's also used. The word desolation comes from another Greek word that means different things, and it can include used of persons. It says deserted by others. So a person could feel desolate if they've been deserted or deprived of the aid and protection of others. Maybe there's lots of people nowadays feeling desolated. Okay. In Webster's dictionary, Webster's dictionary for desolation, it says the act of desolating, destruction, or expulsion of inhabitants, destruction, ruin, waste. And in that sense, it would be used in that sense in terms of the destruction of Jerusalem, say at the time of Nebuchadnezzar, when the temple, the city was destroyed, the people were carried away captive, that kind of thing. His third definition, Webster's, is a desolate state, gloominess, sadness, destitution. So that definition would apply to individuals, okay, not like a city that's laid desolate. It can include humans as well. It's interesting, he uses an example. He takes it right from Matthew 24:15, Webster does. The abomination of desolation, it says Roman armies which ravaged and destroyed Jerusalem. So he's using that destruction by the Roman armies as an example of the abomination of desolation. And then it goes on to the adjective, because desolation can be a noun, or to desolate would be the adjective.
No, that's not too.
Okay. Yeah, so to lay waste, that kind of idea. So let's go now to Daniel. Daniel has lots to say about this. When Jesus mentioned the abomination of desolation, he referred to Daniel the prophet. And Daniel's first mention of that, of desolation, was in Daniel 8:13.
I have that.
Okay.
Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to that certain one who was speaking, how long will the vision be concerning the daily sacrifices and the transgression of desolation, the giving of both the sanctuary and the host to be trampled underfoot?
Okay, so he refers to transgression of desolation, or maybe transgression is like sin, and it's sin that leads to desolation, perhaps. In fact, in the King James Bible, the original word for transgression is usually transgression, but also trespass, sin, rebellion. Okay. Now, where he says how long should be the vision, what was the vision? What vision was he referring to there in Daniel 8:13?
Vision of the ram and the he-goat and the little horn.
Okay, it's the vision of the things that happened just before that, earlier in Daniel 8. If someone could read, please, it's a bit of a read, but Daniel 8, the first 12 verses.
We'll read 4.
Okay.
In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared to me, Daniel, after the one that appeared to me the first time. I saw in the vision, and it so happened while I was looking, that I was in Shushan, the citadel, which is in the province of Elam, and I saw in the vision that I was by the river Ulai. Then I lifted my eyes and saw, and there, standing beside the river, was a ram which had 2 horns, and the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher one came up last. I saw the ram pushing westward, northward, and southward, so that no beast could withstand him, nor was there any that could deliver from his hand, but he did according to his will and became great.
Okay, Paul, you had your hand up. Does that mean you're willing to read verses 5 to 8?
Yeah. I'll read as far as you want me to go.
Okay, 5 to 8.
And as I was considering, suddenly a male goat came from the west across the surface of the whole earth without touching the ground, and the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. Then he came to the ram that had 2 horns, which I had seen standing beside the river, and ran at him with furious power. And I saw him confronting the ram. He was moved with rage against him, attacked the ram, and broke his 2 horns. There was no power in the ram to withstand him, but he cast him down to the ground and trampled him, and there was no one that could deliver the ram from his hand.
Verse 8.
Therefore the male goat grew very great, but when he became strong, the large horn was broken, and in place of it, 4 notable ones came up toward the 4 winds of heaven.
Okay, good. There's kind of different ways of understanding this, and I'm sort of worried here I'm going to get confused, but these different beasts represent different nations or empires on earth, okay? And he goes through and he talks about the ram and the he-goat and the ram and the he-goat.
Verses 20 and 21.
Okay, drop down to verses
Goat.
20 and 21. The ram with 2 horns are the kings of Media and Persia, and the rough goat is the king of Grecia. Okay, so it's talking about successive, we call them world empires, but they were just in that part of the world, of course. Then go back to verse 8. The he-goat, so this is Greece, was very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken. This refers to when the Grecian Empire was destroyed. And it says, 4 came up towards the 4 winds of heaven, or the 4 directions. Out of one of those directions came forth a little horn, which waxed exceeding great toward the south, the east, and the pleasant land. That is understood to be the Roman power, and specifically, it became what we call the papacy, okay? And as we go on in that chapter, okay, just before we go there, yeah, let's read verse 11.
He even exalted himself as high as the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifices were taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down.
Okay, we're going to have to just go through all this material quickly, but what does magnified himself mean?
himself out as being pretty important.
Yeah, yeah, like I'm the top guy or something. Magnified himself even to the prince of the host, which is a reference to who?
Christ.
To Christ himself, okay?
Right.
And we know that the papacy has made some pretty extravagant claims as to who they are, even blasphemous ones, we could say. And that says, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away. What does that refer to? It's interesting that
The
they,
sacrifices.
go ahead, Dorothy.
It would be the sacrifices, the animal sacrifices for our sins were
Well,
taken away.
actually, the word sacrifice there is a supplied word. It's not even in the original. And the word daily, the word daily is from the Hebrew word tamid, which means continual. And I understand there's different variations in how to understand it, but you know, Christ is there always interceding for us. He's always there to help. And you know, he wants us to avail ourselves of all that help. And basically this system has obscured his high priestly ministry, has put other things between us and our Savior, earthly priests, for instance. Yeah, so it's kind of really obscured the work of Christ.
Well, there's also the idea that a lot of people believe, and that is that the a new temple will be built, and the sacrifices will be performed again.
Yes, yes, and there's a lot of variation in the way this chapter is understood. And yes, we're going to get to that about the temple and the possible third temple yet to be built.
So in that case, if the papacy comes along and says, no, we're going to stop all of this, there's no need for all of this, and it would seem that their prominence is shown by saying, we're going to stop this, we're going to take this away.
Yeah.
And everybody and the world is going to wander after them. They're going to follow along.
Yeah. Some do understand it that way. Let's go on to verses 12 and 13. Daniel 8, 12 and 13. Paul?
Because of transgression, an army was given over to the horn to oppose the daily, and he cast truth down to the ground. He did all this and prospered. Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to that certain one who was speaking, how long will the vision be concerning the daily and the transgression of desolation, the giving of both the sanctuary and the host to be trampled underfoot?
Okay. Maybe just read verse 14 as well. This is where the answer to Daniel's question is given.
And he said to me, for 2,300 days, then the sanctuary shall be cleansed.
Okay. And we'll get into that a little bit. There's a lot of prophetic time periods involved in all of this that have been charted out in different ways. And we won't get into that too much because it gets pretty complicated.
There's a footnote about those 2,300 days in my Bible, and I'm sure in probably others, that this is talking about literal evenings and mornings.
Okay. The footnote is for the word days, I think, because it's translated from the Hebrew Arab boker, which is evening, morning.
Yeah.
But we understand, there's something we understand about the 2,300 days that's quite important.
It represents years.
Okay, that represents years, and there's scriptural backing for that. A lot of these prophetic periods are expressed in terms of days, but when you assign 1 year for each day, then it works out actually amazingly well, and we'll see some of that. Anyway, Daniel was quite sort of amazed at all this prophecy, these words he was given. He didn't understand it, but it was explained to him in verses 15 to 25. Yeah, we won't read all of that. Some of it's a repetition of what we've read that he actually saw, but this is explained to Daniel in verses 15 to 25. Let's pick it up at verse 26, Daniel 8:26. You have it, Nora?
26.
Yeah.
And the vision of the evening and the morning, which was told, is true. Wherefore shut thou up the vision, for it shall be for many days.
Okay, go ahead and read verse 27 as well.
And I, Daniel, fainted and was sick certain days. Afterwards I rose up and did the king's business, and I was astonished at the vision, but none understood it.
Okay,
Mhm.
end of the chapter. So he sees this vision is explained to him, and he's just kind of overwhelmed by it, and he faints and is sick certain days. And then it takes a big break before we get more explanation of it. So it's actually a good time for us to take a break.
And just before we do, though, before we lose our train of thought,
Yep.
you were saying that there's two ways of looking at it. It could be mornings and evenings, or it could be literal days referring to actual years.
Yes.
But in that verse 26, it says, and the vision of the evenings and mornings. So it's talking about evenings and mornings, not years.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, and within the sort of two major ways of understanding it, there's many variations too. I've seen a lot of them. Okay, let's go ahead and take a break for 10 minutes here, and we'll come back at 11:15. We have lots more to cover.